From the moment you were born, your mind began collecting data, sounds, sights, beliefs, behaviors. Everything around you started shaping who you thought you were supposed to be. You didn't choose your first environment. You didn't choose the conversations you overheard. You didn't choose the patterns you witnessed in your household. But all of those things began laying the foundation for your mental operating system. Just like a computer gets loaded with default software, you were loaded with thoughts, fears, and expectations that weren't necessarily yours, but they became yours by repetition. You were programmed every time someone told you to be realistic. You were programmed when a teacher said you're not that smart. You were programmed when you heard your parents stress over bills or say things like, money doesn't grow on trees. You were programmed when people laughed at your dreams. And slowly, quietly, those inputs began carving grooves into your brain. Grooves that became beliefs, and beliefs that became limits. Over time, you accepted them, not because they were true, but because they were familiar. And here's the danger of familiarity. Your brain prefers it. The brain isn't wired for success. It's wired for survival. It doesn't care if you're thriving. It cares if you're safe. So even if the truth you were fed was small, fearful, or destructive, your brain latched onto it because it was repeated, and repetition is how the brain learns. That's why people stay stuck, not because they're weak, not because they're lazy, but because their programming is outdated and they've never questioned the code. Most people never stop to ask, who taught me to think this way? They never pause to investigate the voices in their head. Voices that say you'll never make it, or people like you don't succeed, or stay in your lane. These voices aren't divine. They're not even original. They're echoes, recordings from your past that have been playing so long you started mistaking them for your own. But those voices were someone else's fear, someone else's failure, someone else's frustration. And if you don't confront them, you'll carry someone else's story as your own. What's wild is that this programming doesn't just stay in your thoughts. It shows up in your behavior. It shows up when you procrastinate on your goals, not because you're lazy, but because deep down you don't believe you're worthy of success. It shows up when you shrink your ideas in rooms full of people, not because you lack vision, but because you were programmed to avoid judgment. It shows up when you play small, self-sabotage, and settle for less, because you've been brainwashed to think less is all you deserve. The subconscious mind runs 95% of your daily life, and it doesn't know the difference between truth and lie. It just accepts what's repeated. So if you grew up hearing negativity, doubt, or defeatist language, then that became your foundation. That's why no matter how much motivation you consume, if you don't change the root programming, you'll always default back to the old system. The problem isn't your ambition. It's the software your ambition is trying to run on. That's why success isn't just about learning something new. It's about unlearning what no longer serves you. It's not just adding new information. It's deleting corrupted files. And unlearning is harder than learning. It requires you to question things you've believed your whole life. It requires you to go back to the mental blueprint and say, wait a minute, who built this? And if the foundation wasn't built on truth, it has to be rebuilt. That process is uncomfortable. But it's necessary if you want to live free. Freedom starts when you take control of the narrative, when you stop letting the past decide your future, when you start writing code on purpose instead of running hand-me-down mental software. You have the power to interrupt the pattern. You have the authority to pause, examine, and replace every single thought that no longer aligns with where you're going. That's not just mindset work. That's spiritual warfare. Because the real battle is in your belief system. Your mind is fertile ground, and it will grow whatever you plant. If you keep planting seeds of doubt, you'll keep reaping frustration. But if you plant seeds of truth, seeds of identity, abundance, faith, and vision, then the harvest shifts. But here's the key. The weeds won't leave on their own. You have to uproot them. You have to actively replace the old program with a new one that's aligned with your purpose, your calling, and your potential. You can't build a new life with an old mindset. The version of you that's successful, free, and walking in overflow doesn't run on fear-based programming. That version of you thinks differently, speaks differently, and believes differently. And that transformation doesn't start outside. It starts in the privacy of your own thoughts. The revolution begins in your mind. Every belief you hold today was planted at some point in your past, and many of those seeds were lies, cleverly disguised as facts, warnings, or just how life works. From childhood, society, culture, even people who loved you, projected their own limitations onto you. Not always out of malice, but out of their own programming. They said, don't get your hopes up. That's too risky. Or you're not cut out for that. Those words weren't just noise. They were lies that started shaping your reality before you ever had a chance to choose your own. When you hear something often enough, especially from a trusted source, your brain internalizes it as truth. The lie becomes law. It becomes the invisible fence around your dreams. And the wild part is most people never realize they're living inside of someone else's fear. They don't know they've accepted lies as boundaries. Instead, they call it being realistic, being humble, being cautious. But underneath all those words is often a deep belief that says, I'm not enough, or I don't deserve more. And that belief doesn't just sit in your mind, it steers your entire life. Lies have a way of nesting. They settle in, they grow roots, and they start influencing everything. How you view opportunity, how you see yourself in a room, how you handle money, how you handle love, how you react to rejection. A single lie, if left unchallenged, can rob you of decades. It can keep you in cycles, stuck in the same place, wondering why nothing ever changes, when in reality, the only thing that needs to change is the story you believe about yourself. You can't activate your full power while you're still carrying someone else's insecurity. You can't walk in authority if your identity is still built on doubt. The lies sound like truth because they've been in your system so long. But just because something feels familiar doesn't make it accurate. That's why you have to confront the internal dialogue, that running script in the back of your mind that says you're too late, too flawed, too inexperienced. You didn't come up with that on your own. It was given to you. And now it's time to give it back. Detoxing the lies requires brutal honesty. You have to look at your results. What patterns keep showing up in your life? What dreams have you been delaying for years? What fears keep getting in the way? Behind every delay is a belief. And often that belief is rooted in deception. You might believe that money is hard to make, or that relationships never last, or that success is reserved for other people. Those aren't random thoughts. They're narratives you've adopted over time, often reinforced by experiences that seemed to prove them right. But even experiences can lie when interpreted through the wrong lens. To detox is to extract. It's not passive, it's painful. Because it means unearthing the parts of your story that you've buried, ignored, or accepted without question. It means sitting in the discomfort of asking, what if I've been wrong about me? And it also means being willing to reject what you were taught if it doesn't serve your growth. That's a bold move. That's a move most won't make, because detoxing the lies forces you to stop blaming your past and start taking full responsibility for your future. The lies you believe will always limit the life you live. You may think you're afraid of failure, but what if you're just afraid of confronting the truth about how powerful you really are? What if you've dimmed your light so long, the thought of turning it all the way up feels overwhelming? What if you're not scared of trying? What if you're scared of succeeding? Because success would require you to fully own your identity. These are the deeper questions that surface when the lies start losing their grip. There's a reason people cling to their limitations. There's a strange safety in familiar pain, a weird comfort in known struggle. It becomes part of your identity. You get used to being the underdog. You learn how to function in dysfunction. But comfort doesn't mean alignment. And peace doesn't mean absence of challenge. It means presence of truth. Until you expose the lies, you can't experience real peace. Just a polished version of internal conflict. A quiet chaos hidden behind a smile. Your potential doesn't need to be created, it needs to be revealed. And what's in the way of that revelation? The lies, the false identities, the old programming that says you can't, you shouldn't, you won't. Every time you shed a lie, more of your real power comes into view. Power isn't something you get from the outside. It's something you unlock from within. But to access it, you've got to get honest about what doesn't belong inside you anymore. When the lies are gone, clarity rushes in, not because you learned something new, but because you finally unlearned the deception that was clouding your vision. You don't need more potential, you need less pollution, less doubt, less fear, less borrowed insecurity. You need to detox your mind the same way you detox your body, aggressively, consistently, and unapologetically. Only then can the truth about who you are rise to the surface and lead your life. Every word you speak is a seed, and every seed produces a harvest. The world you're living in today is a reflection of the words you've sown consistently over time. Whether you realize it or not, your language has been shaping your life, not just in conversations with others, but in the secret, ongoing conversation you have with yourself. That internal dialogue, the one that runs on repeat in your mind, has more influence over your actions, decisions, and destiny than any external factor. The truth is, your words don't just describe your life, they design it. Most people speak based on how they feel, not realizing that feelings are temporary, but words are tools that build permanent structures. When you say, I'm tired, I'm broke, I'm overwhelmed, you're not just expressing a feeling, you're reinforcing a pattern. Your brain and body hear you, your subconscious listens, and it starts moving in agreement with what you declare. That's how powerful your mouth is. It doesn't just report on your reality, it creates it. The words you speak consistently become beliefs. The beliefs you hold shape your expectations. Your expectations drive your behavior, and your behavior determines your results. So if you trace it all the way back, the starting point of success or failure is speech. That's why people who constantly talk about problems rarely see solutions. They've programmed their mind to expect struggle. They've built a vocabulary of defeat, and now they live inside the very thing they keep talking about. There's a reason why speaking life is a discipline. It's not just about being positive or avoiding negativity. It's about aligning your language with your identity, your vision, and your future. If you want to see overflow, you have to start declaring overflow. If you want to live in purpose, you have to start speaking purpose. The atmosphere around you responds to the authority within you. But that authority is only activated when you open your mouth and release words that match the life you desire, not the life you're trying to escape. Too many people use their words to survive, not to build. They say just enough to get by, to keep peace, to play it safe. But safe speech leads to stagnant lives. Growth requires bold declarations, faith-filled speech, words that stretch you beyond what your eyes can see right now. You don't need to wait until the situation looks different to speak differently. You have to speak differently so the situation can shift. Speech is the strategy that comes before the shift, not after it. Think about the people who always say, nothing ever works out for me. That's not just a complaint, that's a confession. And the more they say it, the more they train their brain to expect failure. So even when opportunity shows up, they don't see it clearly. Or worse, they self-sabotage. Not because they lack potential, but because their words have painted a picture of a world where good things are rare and struggle is normal. They're living in the house their words built. You have to become fiercely intentional with your vocabulary. Stop casually speaking what you don't want. Stop repeating language that doesn't match your assignment. Instead of saying, I can't afford it, say, I'm in the process of increasing my income. Instead of, I always mess things up, say, I'm learning and growing stronger every day. Instead of, I'm just trying to make it, say, I'm being prepared for more than enough. These are not just words, they're weapons, tools, instruments of transformation. When you speak life, you elevate your energy. You shift the frequency of your environment. Your words have creative power, not just emotionally, but spiritually and mentally. That's why it's not enough to think positively. You must speak with authority. The vibration of your voice carries weight. It breaks mental strongholds. It reconditions your subconscious. It calls forth things that haven't manifested yet and pulls them into your experience. And that's not just motivational talk. It's a law of creation. The challenge is that speaking life takes courage, especially when your circumstances contradict your confession. It's easy to speak faith when everything is going well, but real power shows up when you declare abundance while staring at lack, or speak healing while feeling pain. That kind of speech rewrites your reality from the inside out. It tells your mind, your body, and your environment what to align with. And over time, it becomes your new normal, not because something outside of you changed first, but because you decided to lead your life with language. When you speak life, you're not ignoring your current situation, you're rewriting it. You're not pretending the facts don't exist, you're declaring that the facts are subject to change. And they will change when your words are consistent with your vision and not your fear. The world within you must become greater than the world around you, and that transformation begins when you start speaking as the person you're becoming, not the person you've been. Repetition is not just a learning tool, it is a spiritual and psychological principle that governs how humans are shaped. Whatever you hear, say, or do repeatedly becomes part of you. Your habits, your thoughts, your beliefs, even your identity are all formed through repetition. That's why change doesn't happen through a one-time burst of inspiration. It happens through daily disciplined exposure to truth. The most powerful revelations in your life didn't come from hearing something once. They came from hearing it so many times that it finally broke through the wall of your old programming. Most people underestimate the power of repetition because they're addicted to novelty. They want something new every day, a new quote, a new trick, a new secret. But transformation doesn't come from variety, it comes from mastery. And mastery comes from repeating what matters until it becomes second nature. You don't need 1,000 strategies, you need one truth drilled so deeply into your mind and spirit that it becomes part of your default response to life. It's not what you occasionally hear that changes you. It's what you consistently absorb. Every belief you hold right now was shaped through repetition. You weren't born believing in limitations, fear, or scarcity. You learned those things by being exposed to them again and again. So if repetition created the old you, then repetition must also create the new you. That means you have to be intentional about what you repeat, because repetition is happening whether you're conscious of it or not. The question is, are you repeating lies or repeating truth? Repetition breaks resistance. At first, when you try to speak differently, think differently, or act differently, your mind will push back. It's used to the old pattern, but when you repeat the new behavior long enough, the resistance weakens. Your brain starts to rewire. New neural pathways are formed, and what once felt forced becomes automatic. That's why people who succeed often say the same affirmations, read the same scriptures, or listen to the same messages over and over again, not because they forgot, but because they understand the power of soaking in truth until it becomes alive. You don't become confident by hyping yourself up once. You become confident by constantly reinforcing the truth about who you are, even when your emotions and circumstances say otherwise. Repetition builds internal authority. It allows you to speak and act from a place of deep conviction instead of shallow motivation. Motivation fades, emotion fluctuates, but conviction is built through consistency. It's built through saying it, believing it, and doing it until there is no longer a gap between who you are and who you were created to be. Repetition is how you build spiritual muscles. Just like physical exercise shapes the body through repeated movement, spiritual and mental strength are developed by repeating truth, prayer, meditation, and focused action. One workout doesn't make you fit. One prayer doesn't make you powerful. One affirmation doesn't change your destiny. It's the discipline of returning again and again to the same foundational truths that solidifies your transformation. And every time you do, you dig the truth deeper into your core. One of the biggest mistakes people make is quitting before the repetition takes root. They try something for a week, don't see results, and assume it doesn't work. But results follow rhythm. If you plant a seed and dig it up every other day to check if it's growing, it will never take root. The same goes for transformation. You must trust the process enough to keep watering the soil even when nothing seems to be happening yet. Because under the surface, repetition is doing its work. The enemy of growth isn't failure, it's inconsistency. You don't need to